The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wider than some cities. 12 massive thrones formed a circle around the central platform, each one designed to hold a different alien species. Today, all 12 seats were filled with beings who considered themselves the masters of the galaxy. Admiral Zex Thara stood at the center of the chamber. His blue skin gleamed under the bright lights, and his forearms moved in practiced gestures as he spoke. The hegemony had sent their best negotiator for this simple task. After all, dealing with a new primitive species was hardly challenging work. The matter before us today is simple, Zex Thara announced, his voice echoing through the vast space. The species known as humans has been discovered on a small world they call Earth. Our scouts report they have barely achieved faster than light travel. They still use crude fusion engines and metal projectile weapons. Laughter rippled through the chamber. The spider-like architects clicked their approval with sharp leg taps against their throne. The energy beings known as the Collective hummed in amusement, their forms shifting between different colors. Their technology is perhaps 200 years behind our youngest member species, continued a representative from the Kralik sovereignty. Her scales changed from green to yellow as she spoke, showing her contempt. They cannot even properly shield their communications. We have been listening to their radio signals for decades. More laughter filled the chamber. To these beings, humanity was nothing more than an interesting curiosity. A species that had somehow stumbled into space travel despite their obvious limitations. The proposal is standard, Zex Thara said, pulling up a holographic document that floated above the central platform. The humans will be classified as a restricted development species. They will surrender all military assets to Council oversight. They will accept our guidance in technological advancement. In return, they will be protected from hostile forces and allowed to develop under our careful supervision. The terms appeared simple and generous to the Council members. Most species begged for such protection when they first encountered the galactic community. The alternative was usually conquest or destruction by less friendly empires. The tribute requirements are also standard, Zex Thara continued. 30% of their industrial output will be provided to the Council to fund their protection. Additionally, they will provide raw materials and labor as requested for Council projects. The massive doors at the far end of the chamber opened with a deep rumble. A single figure walked across the polished floor toward the center platform. The human ambassador moved with steady steps, showing no sign of fear or nervousness, despite being surrounded by beings that could destroy her world with a simple command. Captain Sarah Chen wore a simple blue uniform with minimal decoration. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her brown eyes scanned the assembled aliens with calm interest. She looked like exactly what the Council expected from a primitive species, unremarkable and easily intimidated. Ambassador Chen, Zex Thara said, his tone suggesting he was speaking to a child. I trust your species has considered our generous offer of protection and guidance. Chen stopped at the center platform and looked up at the circle of massive beings surrounding her. Her expression remained neutral as she spoke in clear, measured words. We have considered your proposal, Admiral, she said. The government of Earth appreciates the Council's interest in our welfare. However, we must respectfully decline your offer of protection. The chamber fell silent. Not a single sound echoed in the vast space as 12 species tried to process what they had just heard. In over 3,000 years of galactic expansion, no newly discovered species had ever refused Council protection. I believe there has been a translation error, said the representative from the Vorthan Empire, his mechanical voice carrying a note of confusion. No species declines our protection. It is not possible to survive in galactic space without Council support. Chen shook her head calmly. There was no translation error. Earth formally rejects the proposed terms. We will not surrender our military assets. We will not accept technological restrictions. We will not pay tribute to the Council. Impossible, roared the Kralik's representative, her scales now flashing angry red patterns. You are barely capable of interstellar flight. Without our protection, you will be conquered within a year by any number of hostile empires. Perhaps, Chen replied with the same calm tone. But that will be our choice to make. Admiral Zexthara leaned forward on his throne, all four of his arms spread wide in a gesture of disbelief. Young ambassador, I fear you do not understand the reality of your situation. Your species possesses fewer than 50 starships. Our smallest member empire fields over 10,000 vessels. You cannot simply refuse council authority. Chen looked directly at the admiral and smiled slightly. It was not a warm expression. We understand our situation perfectly, Admiral. We also understand yours. This is entertaining, laughed the spider-like architect representative. The primitive thinks it can threaten us. Perhaps we should simply take what we need from their world and be done with it. That would be unwise, Chen said quietly. The chamber erupted in laughter again. Even Zexthara could not hide his amusement at the humans' boldness. A species with 50 ships threatening the combined might of the galactic community was beyond absurd. Very well, Zexthara said when the laughter died down. Perhaps you need time to consult with your leaders and reconsider this foolish position. I will grant you 72 hours to prepare a more reasonable response. That is very generous of you, Admiral, Chen replied. 72 hours will be sufficient for humanity to prepare our response. Excellent. I assume when you return, you will be ready to sign the Standard Protection Treaty? Chen's smile grew wider, though it still held no warmth. When I return, Admiral, you will have humanity's complete and final answer to your proposal. The human ambassador turned and walked back toward the chamber doors with the same steady pace she had entered with. Not once did she look back at the assembled representatives of galactic power. As the doors closed behind her, the chamber filled with amused chatter. The aliens discussed how they would divide human territory after the inevitable surrender. None of them noticed the small recording device Chen had left on the central platform, quietly transmitting everything back to Earth. The communication networks of the Council burned with activity in the hours following the human ambassador's departure. Admiral Zexthara sat in his private quarters aboard the massive command ship Eternal Glory, reviewing fleet deployment orders with growing satisfaction. The humans have given us the perfect excuse, he told his aide, a nervous Kralix officer whose scales flickered between green and yellow. Their refusal to accept Council protection means we can classify them as a hostile force. No one will question our response. Across Council space, military commanders received their orders with practiced efficiency. The response would be overwhelming, not because humanity posed any real threat, but because the Council needed to send a clear message to every species watching this drama unfold. The Kralix sovereignty committed 3 heavy cruiser groups to the operation. Each ship measured over 2 kilometers in length and carried enough firepower to level a continent. Their commanders were eager to test their new plasma cannon arrays against primitive human defenses. The Vorthan Empire contributed 2 full battle groups from their home fleet. These mechanical beings had perfected the art of space warfare over thousands of years. Their ships moved in perfect geometric formations, each vessel a work of deadly engineering art. The silicon-based architects sent their newest dreadnoughts, massive geometric shapes that defied traditional ship design. These vessels looked more like floating cities than warships, but each one carried enough exotic matter weapons to crack a moon. Even the mysterious collective committed forces to the operation. Their energy-based ships appeared as shifting clouds of colored light. But inside those beautiful displays lurked weapons that could drain the life from entire planets. In total, over 200 warships began moving toward the Sol system. It was the largest punitive fleet in Council history, assembled to crush a species that barely possessed 50 primitive vessels. The humans will surrender the moment they see our fleet, declared Fleet Commander Torvash of the Kralix forces. No species is foolish enough to fight such overwhelming odds, but not everyone in the fleet shared his confidence. Deep in the sensor bay of the Hegemony flagship, Lieutenant Kexandra studied the latest intelligence reports with growing unease. The young Hegemony officer had been tasked with monitoring human communications and activities during the 72-hour deadline. Sir, she reported to Admiral Zexthara, we are detecting unusual energy patterns from the Sol system. Our long-range sensors are picking up massive power signatures near the planet they call Jupiter. Zexthara barely looked up from his strategic planning. Probably their primitive industrial facilities. These young species always rush to build defenses when they realize how outmatched they are. With respect, Admiral, these readings are far beyond their known technological capabilities. The energy output we are detecting would require antimatter reactors or stellar engineering on a massive scale. Impossible. Zexthera waved one of his four hands dismissively. Our scouts confirmed their most advanced ships use basic fusion drives. They have barely mastered gravity manipulation. These readings are obviously errors in our sensors or interference from solar activity. Lieutenant Kexandra returned to her station, but the readings continued to trouble her. The energy signatures were not only massive but clearly artificial in nature. They followed patterns that suggested enormous construction projects or weapon systems far beyond what humanity should possess. Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Sarah Chen stood before the assembled leaders of the United Earth Defense Council. The room was small compared to the Grand Council chamber, but it contained representatives from every nation and orbital colony in human space. The Council fleet is already moving toward our system, Chen reported. Intelligence estimates over 200 enemy ships will arrive within 60 hours. They expect us to surrender immediately upon their arrival. And what do you recommend, Captain? Asked President Martinez of the Earth Federation. Our conventional fleet would be completely outmatched by such numbers. Chen smiled the same cold smile she had shown in the council chamber. I recommend we give them exactly what they asked for, Mr. President. They want to see what humanity is capable of. I think it is time we showed them. She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. The image showed the outer solar system with Jupiter and its moons clearly visible. But there was something else in the display. A massive shape hidden in Jupiter's shadow. Too large to be any natural object. Project Damocles has been operational for 37 years, Chen explained to the stunned leaders. We began construction 3 years after our first contact with alien signals. We assumed that any species capable of interstellar travel would eventually find us. And we decided to be ready. The shape in the hologram rotated slowly, revealing details that made several council members gasp. It was clearly a ship, but its scale defied imagination. 10 kilometers long and bristling with weapon systems that belonged in science fiction rather than reality. The UES Defiance is the first of our Titangent-class warships, Chen continued. We have 17 more under construction in facilities hidden throughout the outer system. Each one is equipped with weapons and defensive systems developed specifically to fight technologically superior enemies. How is this possible? Demanded General Harrison of the Colonial Defense Forces. The resource requirements alone should have been impossible to hide. We built them using automated mining and construction systems in the asteroid belt and outer planet moons, Chen replied. Every piece of exotic matter, every advanced component was developed in complete secrecy. The public space program was never more than a cover story. But the technology, protested Dr. Yamamoto, head of the Earth Science Council. These weapon systems require knowledge we do not possess. Chen's expression grew grim. We have been monitoring alien communications for 40 years, Doctor. We learned much from listening to their unguarded transmissions. We also had help from other sources. She did not elaborate on what those other sources might be. But several council members exchanged worried glances. The implications were troubling. The council believes they are dealing with a primitive species armed with crude weapons, Chen continued. They have no idea what humanity has actually built during our years of preparation. Their fleet is configured for a quick intimidation mission, not a real war. What are your orders, Captain? President Martinez asked quietly. We wait for them to arrive, Chen replied. We let them make their demands and show off their superior numbers. And then we introduce them to the new reality of human space. Far above Earth's atmosphere, hidden sensors tracked the approaching council fleet with perfect precision. Deep in the outer system, massive ships that had never appeared on any public registry began moving from their concealed positions. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change the balance of galactic power forever. The Council was coming to teach humanity its place in the cosmic order. They had no idea that humanity had spent decades preparing to teach them a very different lesson. The Council fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system in perfect formation. 214 warships arranged themselves in a display designed to intimidate any species into immediate surrender. The sight was magnificent and terrifying, a wall of metal and energy that stretched across space like a miniature galaxy. Admiral Zexthara stood on the bridge of the Eternal Glory, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. His fleet had arrived exactly on schedule, and everything appeared to be proceeding according to plan. The human system lay defenseless before the assembled might of galactic civilization. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "we are detecting the human fleet. 47 vessels, just as our scouts predicted. They are maintaining position in orbit around their home world." "Excellent," Zexthara replied. "Open a communication channel to Earth. Let us end this farce quickly." The main screen activated, showing the bridge of what appeared to be a human command vessel. Captain Sarah Chen appeared, wearing the same simple uniform she had worn in the council chamber. Behind her, human officers moved calmly about their duties, showing no sign of panic despite the overwhelming force arrayed against them. "Admiral Zexthara," Chen said with a slight nod. "I see you brought friends." "Captain Chen," the admiral replied, allowing smugness to creep into his voice. "As you can see, the Council has assembled sufficient force to ensure your compliance with our protection treaty. I trust you are now ready to discuss more reasonable terms." Chen appeared to consider this for a moment, then smiled that same cold smile he remembered from their first meeting. "Admiral, before we discuss terms, I should mention something that might interest you. You are currently positioned in the shadow of one of our installations." "Your installations are irrelevant," Zexthara scoffed. "We have studied your technology for decades. Your most advanced weapons could not damage a single ship in my fleet." "I appreciate your confidence," Chen replied. "However, you might want to check your long-range sensors. I believe you will find something unexpected." Zexthara gestured impatiently to his sensor officer, who quickly ran a detailed scan of the surrounding space. For a moment, nothing appeared unusual. The gas giant Jupiter hung in the distance, its moons clearly visible in their expected orbits. Then the computer began processing the gravitational data, and everything changed. "Sir," the sensor officer said, his voice rising with confusion, "I am detecting a massive gravitational anomaly near Jupiter. The readings indicate an artificial object of enormous size." "Impossible," Zexthara snapped. "Our scouts would have detected any large human installations." "Sir, the object it is moving." On the tactical display, a new contact appeared. At first, it seemed like a small asteroid drifting from behind Jupiter. But as the sensors gathered more data, the scale became apparent. The object was not small. It was simply very far away. "Admiral," Lieutenant Kexandra called from her sensor station, her voice tight with disbelief. "The object is artificial. Length approximately 10 kilometers. Mass readings are off the scale. I am detecting massive power sources and what appear to be weapon systems." The bridge of the Eternal Glory fell silent as the implications sank in. A 10-kilometer-long warship was impossible. The largest vessels in the Council fleet measured barely 3 kilometers from bow to stern. Such a ship would require technology and resources far beyond what humanity should possess. "Visual confirmation," Zexthara ordered quietly. The main screen switched to a telescopic view of Jupiter's vicinity. At first, they saw only the familiar sight of the gas giant and its dancing moons. Then something moved across the star field. A shadow that blocked out distant suns. The human ship emerged fully from Jupiter's shadow like a mountain coming to life. It was impossibly massive, its hull scarred and pitted in ways that suggested it had seen combat before. Weapon systems bristled from every surface. Not the crude projectile weapons the Council expected, but sophisticated energy arrays and launch systems for weapons they could not identify. "Magnificent, is it not?" Chen's voice cut through the stunned silence on the bridge. "We call her the UES Defiance. She is the first of our Tangent-class warships." Admiral Zexthara found his voice after several long moments. "This is impossible. Your species lacks the technology to build such a vessel." "I understand your confusion, Admiral," Chen replied calmly. Your scouts were very thorough in their observations. They correctly identified our public technology level. However, they failed to detect our classified programs. The massive ship continued its slow approach, and more details became visible. The hull was not smooth like council vessels but angular and aggressive, covered in armor plating that looked thick enough to stop any known weapon. Strange markings covered its surface, not decorative patterns, but what appeared to be combat damage that had been repaired multiple times. Your ship design is unknown to us, said Fleet Commander Torvash over the communication channel. His usual confidence had been replaced by uncertainty. These weapon configurations do not match any known technology tree. That is because we did not follow your technology tree, Chen explained. We developed our own approaches to space combat. While your species focused on elegance and efficiency, we optimized for one thing: the ability to destroy enemies who consider themselves superior. The sensor readings continued to pour in, each one more disturbing than the last. The human ship carried enough firepower to engage multiple Council dreadnoughts simultaneously. Its armor appeared to be composed of exotic matter alloys that should have been beyond human ability to produce. Most troubling of all, the power readings suggested technological capabilities that rivaled the most advanced Council civilizations. How long have you been building these ships? Zexthara asked, though he dreaded the answer. Construction on the Defiance began 37 years ago, Chen replied. We have been preparing for this moment since we first detected your radio transmissions. Every year, we grew stronger while you remained unaware of our true capabilities. You have built one impressive ship, admitted the Admiral, trying to regain some measure of confidence. But my fleet contains over 200 vessels. No single ship can stand against such numbers. Chen tilted her head slightly, and her smile grew wider. Did I say we built one ship, Admiral? The long-range sensors suddenly erupted with new contacts. Massive gravitational signatures appeared throughout the outer system as more enormous shapes began moving from hidden positions. Behind the moons of Saturn, 3 more Titangent-class ships emerged from concealment. Near Neptune, 2 more massive hulls appeared on sensors. In the asteroid belt, several smaller but still enormous vessels began broadcasting identification signals. 17 Titangent-class warships, Chen announced as the tactical display filled with new enemy contacts. Each one, equipped with weapons, specifically designed to fight technologically superior opponents. Each one crewed by humans who have spent their entire lives preparing for this war. The Council fleet, which had seemed overwhelmingly powerful just minutes before, suddenly appeared vulnerable and exposed. The human ships were not only massive, but positioned throughout the system in a way that suggested careful tactical planning. The Council forces had flown directly into what appeared to be a carefully prepared trap. This changes nothing, Zexthara declared, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. The Council will not be intimidated by your deception. Surrender now, and we may show mercy to your species. No, Admiral, Chen replied softly. This changes everything, and I believe it is time for your first lesson in human military doctrine. The communication channels of the Council fleet filled with confused chatter as commanders tried to process what they were seeing. Ships that had arrived expecting to intimidate a primitive species now found themselves surrounded by vessels that dwarfed their own. The tactical situation had reversed completely in a matter of minutes. All ships, maintain formation, Admiral Zexthara ordered, though uncertainty crept into his voice. Do not take any aggressive action until we understand what we are dealing with. Captain Chen watched the Council fleet's reaction with clinical interest from the bridge of the UES Defiance. Her crew moved with calm efficiency around her, each officer focused on their assigned tasks. These were not the panicked primitives the Council had expected to find. Admiral, Chen said, her voice cutting through the nervous chatter on the communication channels. I believe you have questions about our capabilities. Perhaps a demonstration would be helpful. That will not be necessary, Zexthara replied quickly. We can discuss terms without any display of force. Oh, but I insist, Chen said with that cold smile. You came here to show us the power of Council technology. It would be rude of us not to return the favor. On the tactical display of the Defiance, Chen's weapon officer highlighted a target, a dense asteroid cluster approximately 50,000 kilometers away from the nearest Council ship. The rocks were large enough to be visible to optical sensors but posed no threat to anyone. Target selected, reported Commander Torres from the weapons station. Kinetic bombardment system is ready for demonstration firing. Proceed, Chen ordered. The massive human ship rotated slowly until its primary weapon array pointed toward the asteroid cluster. Along the Defiance's hull, armored panels slid open to reveal launch tubes that had no equivalent in Council technology. The weapons looked more like massive railguns than traditional energy cannons. "What are you doing?" demanded Fleet Commander Torvash over the communication channel. "Teaching," Chen replied simply. The first kinetic round fired with almost no visible effect. A brief flash of electromagnetic energy appeared along the Defiance's hull. Then nothing. To Council observers, it seemed as if the weapon had malfunctioned or fired a dud round. "Is that supposed to impress us?" scoffed the Kralix commander. "Our plasma cannons produce far more spectacular displays." "Wait for it," Chen suggested. 30 seconds later, the tungsten projectile reached its target. The rod, no larger than a telephone pole but accelerated to 12% of light speed, struck the largest asteroid in the cluster. The result was immediate and devastating. The asteroid did not explode in the traditional sense. Instead, it simply ceased to exist. The kinetic energy of the impact converted the entire mass into superheated plasma that expanded outward in a brilliant sphere of destruction. The shockwave from the impact shattered every other rock in the cluster, reducing millions of tons of matter to glowing gas in less than a second. The Council fleet's sensors recorded every detail of the destruction with scientific precision. The energy release was equivalent to several antimatter warheads detonating simultaneously, but the human weapon had achieved this result using only kinetic force. "Impressive," admitted Admiral Zexthara after a long moment of silence. "Your species has developed effective mining tools." Chen laughed, and the sound was not pleasant. "Mining tools? Admiral, that was our smallest kinetic weapon. We call it a planet cracker because that is exactly what it does when fired at full power into a planet's core." The implications of this statement sent chills through every Council commander. A weapon that could destroy planets was beyond anything in their arsenals. Even their most powerful antimatter warheads could only devastate continents. "You are bluffing," declared the Vorthan battle group commander. "No species would build such weapons. The resources required would bankrupt entire star systems." "Would we?" Chen asked. "Computer, display munitions count for kinetic bombardment systems." A holographic display appeared above the Defiance, visible to all Council ships. The readout showed ammunition levels that defied belief. Each Titangent-class ship carried over 10,000 kinetic rounds, and the display indicated that every weapon was loaded and ready to fire. "We have been building these weapons for 37 years, Chen explained calmly. "Every asteroid mine in our system has contributed materials to our war effort. While you believed us to be primitive miners and farmers, we were actually constructing the largest military arsenal in galactic history." "Impossible numbers," whispered Lieutenant Kexandra on the bridge of the Eternal Glory. "Sir, if these readings are accurate, the humans could destroy every inhabited world in Council space." "The readings must be false," Zexthara replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "No species would build such an arsenal unless they planned to use it. Unless they planned to be ready when someone came to conquer them," Chen corrected. "We learned much from monitoring your communications, Admiral. We know how the Council treats species it considers inferior. We decided long ago that we would never be anyone's subjects." To demonstrate their point further, the human weapon systems began powering up across the fleet. Energy readings spiked as 17 massive ships prepared for potential combat. The power levels were staggering. Each Titangent-class vessel drew more energy than some Council worlds produced. "Our defensive systems are also quite advanced," Chen continued conversationally. "Computer, activate demonstration shields." Around the Defiance, space itself seemed to ripple as exotic energy fields came online. The ship's hull disappeared behind layers of defensive barriers that bent light and deflected particles. Council sensors could no longer achieve solid locks on the human vessel. "Adaptive shielding using controlled gravitational fields," Chen explained. Your weapons would need to penetrate 7 layers of exotic matter barriers before reaching our armor. And our armor, incidentally, is composed of materials that your scientists believe to be impossible to manufacture. The demonstration was having its intended effect. Throughout the Council fleet, commanders were revising their tactical assessments and finding them increasingly grim. The humans had not just built larger ships, they had developed entirely new approaches to space combat that rendered traditional tactics obsolete. "What do you want?" Admiral Zex Thera asked finally. "What do we want?" Chen repeated thoughtfully. "We want the same thing any rational species wants, Admiral. We want to be left alone to develop as we choose. We want to trade with other species as equals, not as subjects. And we want it clearly understood that any attempt to conquer or subjugate humanity will result in the complete destruction of the aggressor. The Council cannot simply ignore the existence of your weapons," protested Fleet Commander Torvash. "Such an arsenal threatens the stability of galactic civilization." "Our arsenal threatens only those who threaten us," Chen replied firmly. "We have no interest in conquest or expansion. But we will never again bow to any alien authority." She paused to let this sink in, then continued with deadly calm. "You came here expecting to find a primitive species that would gratefully accept your protection. Instead, you have discovered that humanity has spent decades preparing to fight and defeat any enemy, regardless of their technological advantages. The choice of how this encounter ends is now yours to make." The Council fleet hung motionless in space, surrounded by human warships that could destroy them all. For the first time in their galactic expansion, the Council faced an enemy that was not only willing to fight, but capable of winning such a fight. The balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted forever. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. The same representatives who had laughed at humanity's audacity just days earlier now sat in stunned silence, watching Captain Chen's image on their screens. The woman who had seemed so unremarkable during her first visit now appeared as something far more dangerous. The voice of a species that had just revealed itself as a potential galactic superpower. "The terms are simple and non-negotiable," Chen announced to the assembled alien leaders. Her calm voice echoed through the vast chamber where no one dared to speak. "Humanity will not be joining the Council as a protectorate. We will not surrender our military assets. We will not accept technological oversight. We will not pay tribute to anyone." Admiral Zex Thera's image appeared beside Chen's on the chamber's screens, transmitted live from his flagship in the Sol system. The proud hegemony commander looked aged and defeated, his 4 arms hanging limply at his sides. "The human claims are accurate," he reported to the Council with obvious reluctance. "Their fleet consists of 17 vessels of unknown design, each measuring approximately 10 kilometers in length. Their weapon systems are beyond our current understanding." "How is this possible?" demanded the spider-like architect representative. "Our scouts confirmed their primitive status. They should not possess such technology." "Our scouts were deceived," Zex Thera admitted. "The humans allowed us to observe only their civilian technology, while developing military systems in complete secrecy. They have been preparing for this confrontation for decades." On the screen, Chen smiled, that same cold expression that had become terrifyingly familiar to Council members. "We have been watching your empire expand for 40 years, learning your strengths and preparing for this moment. You believed you were the apex of galactic civilization. Today, you have learned you were wrong." The implications were staggering. If humanity had been secretly observing and analyzing Council technology for decades, they knew everything. Fleet compositions, weapon capabilities, industrial centers, political weaknesses. The Council had been completely transparent to an enemy they never knew existed. "What are your intentions toward Council space?" asked the energy-based collective representative, its form shifting nervously between colors. "Do you plan to use these weapons for conquest?" "We have no interest in ruling other species," Chen replied firmly. "Humanity seeks only independence and the right to develop without interference. However, any attempt to invade human space or subjugate our people will be met with immediate and overwhelming retaliation." "You threaten the entire galactic community," protested the Krelix representative. though her scales showed fear colors rather than anger. Such weapons could destroy civilizations. Yes, they could, Chen agreed without emotion. That is exactly what they were designed to do. Every council member world, every military installation, every fleet base, is within range of our kinetic bombardment systems. We mapped your entire infrastructure while you ignored us as primitives. The chamber erupted in frightened whispers as the full scope of humanity's preparation became clear. They had not simply built powerful weapons. They had studied the Council's weaknesses and developed specific plans to exploit them. "This is unacceptable," declared Admiral Zexthera, trying to regain some authority. "The Council cannot allow such a threat to exist. Other species will demand action." "Other species are welcome to take whatever action they feel appropriate," Chen replied calmly. "But they should be aware of the consequences. Any hostile action against humanity will result in the complete destruction of the aggressor's homeworld within 24 hours. The threat was delivered so matter-of-factly that it took several moments for its full meaning to register. Chen was not making empty boasts. She was stating operational policy, backed by weapons that had just demonstrated their devastating capabilities. "You would commit genocide?" whispered the Vorthen representative, his mechanical voice betraying shock. "We would defend ourselves by any means necessary," Chen corrected. "The choice of escalation will always belong to our enemies. We prefer peaceful coexistence, but we are prepared for total war." In the Sol system, the human fleet had formed a defensive perimeter around Earth while maintaining weapons locks on every Council ship. The message was clear: leave peacefully or face destruction. Admiral Zexthera found himself in an impossible position, commanding a fleet that was completely outmatched by an enemy they had underestimated beyond all reason. "Fleet Commander Torvash," he ordered reluctantly, "begin withdrawal to minimum safe distance. All ships are to avoid any action that could be interpreted as hostile." "Sir, our orders were to enforce Council authority," the Kralix commander protested. "Our orders did not anticipate this situation," Zexthara replied grimly. "We cannot complete our mission against an enemy capable of destroying our entire fleet." As the Council ships began their retreat from human space, Chen delivered humanity's final statement to the galactic community. Effective immediately, human space is declared neutral territory. Any species wishing to establish diplomatic or trade relations may do so through proper channels. However, all military vessels are prohibited from entering our territory without explicit permission. "You cannot simply declare independence from galactic authority," protested the architect representative. "We are not declaring independence," Chen corrected. "We are announcing our sovereignty. Humanity was never part of your empire, and we never will be. This is not a rebellion, it is a statement of fact." The distinction was important and troubling. Rebellions could be crushed, but sovereign powers had to be negotiated with as equals. By revealing their true capabilities, humanity had forced the Council to accept them as a peer rather than a subject. "What happens now?" asked the collective representative. "Now you learn to live with neighbors instead of subjects," Chen replied. "The age of Council expansion through conquest has ended. Any future growth will require negotiation and mutual agreement rather than military force." The chamber fell silent again as the representatives contemplated this new reality. For 3,000 years, the Council had expanded through a simple formula: find primitive species, offer protection, and absorb them into the galactic community, whether they wanted it or not. The system had worked perfectly until they encountered a species that had spent decades preparing to reject it. "The Council will need time to consider this development," announced the senior hegemony representative. "Take all the time you need," Chen agreed. "But remember, humanity is no longer a secret. Other species will learn of our capabilities, and some may wonder what else you have hidden from them. The galaxy is about to become a much more complicated place." As the transmission ended and the screens went dark, the Council chamber remained silent. Outside, the fleet of Admiral Zexthera continued its withdrawal from human space, leaving behind a species that had fundamentally changed the balance of galactic power. In the outer solar system, 17 massive human warships maintained their positions, weapons powered and crews alert. They had revealed themselves to the galaxy not as conquerors, but as guardians. A species that would never again bow to alien authority. The message was clear to everyone who received it. Humanity had arrived as players on the galactic stage, and the rules of the game would never be the same again. The Council's age of unchallenged dominance was over, and a new era of multipolar galactic politics had begun. The universe had just become a much more dangerous place for anyone who believed in the superiority of alien civilizations over human determination.